Patrick Tay.
Thanks, Minister, for the ministerial statement. I have three supplementary questions. The first question will be, will there be controls
Mr.
such
Tay, you
that
can keep it to 2 questions. Prioritize it.
Okay, 2 questions. My first question, will there be controls such that the one pass does not go to those, does not go particularly more to those from 1 or 2 nationalities and is diverse, and whether there will be limits on the number of dependents in which the ONE pass holders will be able to bring in, such as children, parents, parents-in-law. Second question is, for family officers setting up shop in Singapore and paying their family members and relatives as employees way above the 30,000 per month salary, will they therefore qualify for the one pass as well?
I thank Mr. Patrick Tay for his question. I think for the ONE pass, we don't have a fixed number. The nationality diversity, the nationality concentration, we have envisaged that on a broader perspective, our compass framework will manage to that complementarity part. And because the ONE pass is really targeted at the top 5%, as I've shared earlier on, what we are concerned about is really the quality of that talent coming in. And because it is the economic agencies, together with some of the other sector agencies that we have, like MCCY, we go out through the offices that we have overseas to look for this group of talent to bring here. I think the ability for us to diversify and ensure that it's complementary, to bring as wide a diaspora in as possible would mitigate your concern. On the family officers part, we are developing frameworks in terms of specialized areas in which we are looking at to up the ante in terms of bringing up the level of competence, the expertise and the skill sets and grooming our local talent. So the family officers, depending on the space that they are in, if they are in the green economy and they are hiring members with that level of expertise and talent to help us to develop sustainable green practices in the sustainability space, it's something that we would be prepared to consider. Thank you.
Mr. Pritam Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the Sunday Times yesterday carried a 2-page story on the new One Pass. It quoted sustainability recruiter Greg Britton, as saying, and I quote, as saying, and I quote, "The solution is not simply to import more talent. It needs to be a combination of upskilling and developing local talent alongside bridging in talent to support the building of capacity within Singapore." Another individual, a Dmitry Volkov of a cybersecurity company, remarked that only local experts can effectively identify, monitor, and respond to threats. And his firm contributes to the ecosystem by exposing local talent to real cyber threats. So these individuals understand that skills transfer to Singaporean workers must be at the center of our foreign manpower policies to ensure that Singaporeans can avail themselves to good job opportunities from management to staffing positions. I have 2 supplementary questions for the Minister. First, at last year's parliamentary debate on the motion on securing Singaporeans' jobs and livelihoods and the foreign talent policy, the Workers' Party raised several alternative proposals to alleviate the concerns of Singaporeans at the workplace and to ensure that the local foreign employment divide does not become a permanent fault line. With the introduction of the One Pass and several changes to the Employment Pass framework, as announced by Minister, how does the Ministry intend to promote and track the transfer of skills to Singaporeans by employment pass holders such as the One Pass? In view of the ministerial statement, has the Minister ruled out fixed-term employment passes or other schemes that incentivize such skills transfer to Singaporeans to address skills-related underemployment, amongst other things? Second SQ, the MOM press release on the One Pass states that there are a few routes to apply for it, and it covered 2 in the main text of the press release and 3 in the annex. The annex also stated that more details on the eligibility for new applications and renewals would be published. Can the Minister confirm if there are any other eligibility criteria for the One Pass that have not been published thus far? Thank you.
I thank Mr. Singh for his comments and his question. I don't think we will cover the earlier comment on the Sunday Times. I think perhaps at a separate sitting, I would be happy to engage him further. But just to take his supplementary questions. Now, in my speech earlier, I've already shared in terms of our views towards how beneficial in terms of the top talent bringing in and the potential spin-offs that we have. I suggest that he could refer to that in the Hansard. Today, as we speak, there are many government programs that support capability development. The government has given significant skills future subsidies, Enterprise Singapore ESG Enterprise Development Program, as well as sector-specific programs by various sector agencies are continually supporting the development of skill sets for our locals. And one of the programs that he was particularly interested in is the Capability Transfer Program, the CTP, which is one of the programs that he has actually raised and filed PQs before. Under this Capability Transfer Program, funding support is provided to companies to acquire global capabilities that are not available in Singapore. And this can be done in a variety of ways, such as bringing foreign specialists into Singapore to train locals in new capabilities and sending locals to overseas for overseas training attachments. The scheme was created and it was conceived, and since its inception in 2017, it has benefited more than 140 companies and more than 1,000 locals. Our locals have experienced expanded job scopes as they have acquired new skills. The last 2.5 years, we had some setback because of COVID, but with the reopening of borders, we once again would like to welcome companies to tap on this if they need to bring in global experts in cutting-edge areas. His second point in terms of the multiple routes of that one pass, or the ONE pass. ONE is an acronym for Overseas Networks and Expertise. We are working for all the other routes through different sector agencies in terms of coming up with a framework, and we will also, as I've shared, with MOE, with MCCY, with NRF, and a few other agencies to identify some of these criteria in which we can target this global talent with this kind of expertise. So towards the end of the year, the scheme will start on 1st of January 2023. Towards the end of the year, I suggest he watch this space. More details will be released in due time. Thank you.
Mr. Jarogam.
Sir, will MOM allow ONE pass holders to earn $30,000 a month from one company and smaller amounts from several others, since they will be exempted from job advertising requirements, minimum salary thresholds, and local PMET shares in those other companies? Will Singaporean PMETs and those companies lose out in any way if this happens? And secondly, I note that ONE pass holders do not need to reapply for a new pass if they change jobs. How will the ministry prevent ONE pass holders from switching jobs and joining another company at a lower salary after getting their ONE pass? Thank you.
Well, I thank Mr. Giam for his question. I think the first question, his first SQ, I've already answered, that primarily it comes from one company, the 30,000, but we will not restrict this one ONE pass holder from working with other companies if he's able to transfer skill sets and his expertise. Say, for instance, he could be primarily engaged by one company at a 30,000 salary, but because of his skill sets in corporate governance, he could be invited to become a director on the board of another company, potentially a SME, and provide that benefit. I don't think we should restrict that. To his other point about the renewal, it is one of those points that I raised earlier on in my speech as well. We will work closely with this ONE pass holder. We will work with him regularly in terms of not just updating his progress. At the same time, we are also seeing how we can learn from this talent, the type of skill set that he has, and find ways and means to continue to encourage him to transfer that skills, or her to transfer his skill sets to other companies or to other local Singaporeans. Thank you.
See Leng Ying-Hua.
So we do have a significant pool of mature PMET talents, those that may be in the age of 50s, 60s, and we should do more to help them improve their employment opportunities, as there are still very sticky biasness against this group of PMETs by employers. So can I ask the Minister whether the reductions in the job advertisement period under the FCF from 28 days to 14 days for EP applications reduce the impetus for employers to look to hire local PMEPs, especially those in the more mature ages? In other words, would employers take this reduction as in the reduction in the advertisement period as a signal to look to foreign hires as a first resort rather than a last resort?
I thank Mr. Liang for his concern. As I've shared earlier on, today the tightness is really in businesses or employers being able to find Singaporeans to fill the jobs. We have very high job vacancies compared to job seekers today. By the end of March, it was about 2.4. I think if we look at it moving forward, it would continue to rise. The long-term unemployment has dropped to 0.8%. This is end of March again. Pre-COVID, it was 0.7%. So we are almost back to where we were as of March this year. The shortening of the FCF allows some form of a breathing space for our companies to get the workers, to get the employees that they need, to help them to fulfill their orders, to help them to also gear up new orders coming in. If you look at the refinement of all of our frameworks, the ONE pass is really the peak, the top of the pyramid. But over the last 5 to 6 months, we have announced an entire slew of a balanced framework where, whether it's Compass, we have also improved the criteria, the qualifying salary and so on for the E-Pass and the S-Pass qualifying salaries. All of that is in keeping with the development of our economy. To the group of PMEs in the 50s and 60s, we have also offered significant support measures to ensure that they continue to stay incentivized and enfranchised to continue to work. Our jobs growth incentive is one very clear example of how we've helped them. On top of that, WSG has grants to help in terms of the jobs redesign, jobs reskilling. And parallel with that, MTI has a productivity solutions grant to help companies with grants to help them redesign their own job processes. All of these measures should be viewed not in isolation, but as part of a broader objective to ensure that our Singaporeans they do not get compromised at any stage. And as long as they are prepared to want to look for a job, we will be there to support them, to help them. On top of that, DPM is launching the Forward SG, and you know inherently in each one of the pillars, the target focus again is on Singaporeans to see how we can continue to help them not just keep up, but keep ahead of the competition. I hope that reassures the member. Thank you.
Sang Wei Neng.
Yeah, thank you, Minister, for pointing out that my earlier questions in my PQ is asking about efficacy of the advertising framework under the fair consideration framework in the Career Futures website. So, what are the indicators where how many of the Singaporeans are on track to get top jobs is to look at how many of the good jobs advertised under the fair consideration frameworks are given to Singapore. So, Minister have not answered my PQ as to how many of the jobs that are above $10,000 in salary per month are filled by Singaporeans as compared to non-Singaporeans in the past 5 years. And my second separate question is that, is there a maximum number of years that the one pass holders can have in Singapore? Because it will determine whether he has planned to pass on his expertise or get another Singaporean to fill the top job. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Ang for his question. I think it's timely that he raised this point. I think as a top leader and executive himself, Mr. Ang would appreciate the fact that at that space, people don't just rely on one portal or one scheme to get employed. So while the advertisement, the requirement for the advertisement on the My Careers Future under the Fair Consideration Framework, many of the top talent in all the different space would get employment through a whole host of means. I've also mentioned earlier on about search firms, headhunters. There are also private commercial run portals without promoting. LinkedIn is another example. So there are multiple levels in which people at that level get jobs or get headhunted. Now, if it's any comfort, when we pack the top 5% and the 30,000 mark, and we looked at the statistics of the numbers of about the 8,000 foreign EP holders who are at above the 30,000 mark, when we compared to our local Singapore core, our local Singapore talent in terms of the numbers, if you look at the entire universe of top corporate executives earning $30,000 or more a month, the member would be happy to know that the vast majority of them are Singaporeans. The fundamental objective in creating this ONE pass is to, if I may use this cliche statement, is to really find new cheese. It's for us to up the ante in terms of where we see ourselves 5 years, 10 years down the line, where at every part of the economy, a cutting edge, top-notch frontier industry, we would like that talent to come to help us to launch 1,000 ships in every single one of these sectors. And because of that, the spillover effects to our medium size, our medium segment, our middle segment, broaden it significantly, deepen it, and allow that continued growth of our SMEs to becoming eventually LLEs. That is the intent of this measure. Thank you.
Mr. Donby.
Thank you, Speaker. Many SMEs, which include the small and medium audit practices or the consulting practices, are facing talent crunch or manpower shortage. The One Pass holder allows this holder to hold multiple jobs and even start his or her own businesses. So I wonder, can MOM extend this principle or concept to the EP holders who are working in these knowledge-based industries? 我同意部长的见解，我们需要招募世界顶级的诸葛亮。不过，我想有好的培育计划，我们可以培养出本地的司马懿和庞头。谢谢。
If I can request you just keep a question to one language, unless you have a separate question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker. I'll just answer in one language. not a fan of Pantong and Sima Yi. I think it's important that that the member understands that the ONE pass is one part of a broader framework that we have been rolling out for the last few months. For the different sectors that he was talking about, it is also important to understand that we have sector-specific measures as well to cater, and there are multiple schemes available, including in MTI, there's a MSSI scheme to help to channel the much-needed workforce gaps, to address the much-needed workforce gaps in the different sectors, including even healthcare. So there are multiple measures. So we should not sort of look at the ONE pass in isolation. We should look at the entire improvement in terms of the S-pass, our normal E-pass, as well as the work permit, including even at my announcement early on at COS this year about the introduction of more NTS workers that they can import from non-traditional sources for our Indian restaurants in terms of Indian chefs. So there are multiple policy maneuvers that we have done, multiple policy refinements that we have done to ensure that we are able to differentiate and make it a lot more targeted to support the needs of the small and the medium enterprise. Thank you.
Ms. Hazel Phua.
Can the Minister share with us how MOM came to the conclusion that the letter of consent for spouses is material and needle-moving? Like, was it based on a survey of prospective candidates or advice from an international HR consultancy? And secondly, with this introduction of the ONE pass, which separates the top talent from the other EP holders, it actually gives us flexibility to further adjust our EP criteria without affecting our ability to attract top talent. So does MOM have plans to further tighten control of EP? Thank you.
I thank Ms. Phua for her question. The feedback we get comes from multiple sources, and we triangulate the data very regularly. We get feedback from economic agencies, our own sector agencies. We get feedback from trades associations. We get feedback also from some of the chambers that we deal with. When we talk about needle-moving initiatives, needle-moving measures like the ONE pass, because of the segment in which we are targeting, because this is the pinnacle of that pyramid that I was talking about, by sending that signal across, it signals to the world that we are open for business and that we are welcoming for talent in that very rarefied space. And we are prepared to bring them here to help them set up so that we, as a country, as a people, can also benefit from their talents and from their skill sets. Now, earlier on, I forgot to answer a point. On the LOC given, it is only given to the spouse of that pass holder. It is not given to the dependents of the pass holder. So it is only given to the spouse of the pass holder. And like I said, because of the highly selective nature of the scheme, we do not envisage that the numbers will be high, the delta will be high. Hence, my earlier statement that it will not be material, because it will not materially affect the LOCs that we're going to issue out of MOM. I hope that explains to the member clearly. Thank you.
Sir Witcher.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to I thank the Minister for sharing some of the spin-off benefits that SMEs would actually benefit from this new ONE pass. SMEs collectively actually employ a large majority of Singaporeans and are actually facing intense competition for talent. To support every stage of their business growth, I appreciate that he also shared about support for vertical sectors, but I think SMEs require support at every different stage of business growth and are already facing intense competition from larger enterprises. So I'd like to ask the Minister, is there further direct support, direct benefits for SMEs to give them the support to find the talent that enables them to be the future LLEs and to reduce being further disadvantaged in this intense competition for talent? Thank you.
I thank Mr. Chia for his very pertinent point. Our intent in growing this segment, first and foremost, is targeted to improve, to increase, to broaden the spillover effects to our SMEs. As I've shared, we want to grow our ecosystem as a whole by creating new cheese, significantly new cheese, so that down the stream, up the stream, our local benefits, our local companies will benefit. This measure will strengthen our standing as an international hub for talent. It will bring significantly more businesses for our local companies, especially our SME, and increase the opportunities for all of our Singaporean workers. Having said that, we have multiple grants, we have multiple support solutions to continue to help strengthen and support our SMEs. We encourage our big LLEs to act as queen bee when we go out to hunt together as a pack to bring our SMEs along. We also hope that SMEs will work with the government. And in the multiple approach that we have done, as we go out and expand our reach globally, we would urge the SMEs, especially our SME bosses, to be nimble because of their size. They are able to provide significant, engaging challenges and a very, very responsive type of HR policies for their young talent to join them. And collectively, we can build a much bigger and a much better future for all of our ecosystem here in Singapore. Together with the Singapore Business Federation, we have also supported them on the development of an AFA to see how we can continue to help our SMEs to transform and leverage up. There are multiple measures to your point, Mr. Chia, and we are always open to more suggestions as to how we can continue to improve our reach and our support for them. Thank you.
Mr. Louis Chua.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've got two supplementary questions. The first relates to my original PQ. In terms of the EPs as a whole, not just that of the top talent, in terms of meeting the FCF advertising requirements, do we have any statistical data to show that it's actually achieving its stated purpose and that companies are not just going through the motions of putting up the advertisements, for example, such as the number of interviews being granted or the number of applicants that actually end up being hired through these advertisements? The second is also in terms of timing. I recognize that as Minister shared, right now the labour market is very tight, but at the same time there are actually risks in the horizon in terms of rising risk of a recession and slowing growth. So in terms of the lower duration, would it be a bit too early to do so? Thank you.
I thank Mr. Chua for his question. Earlier on, I've shared that I think about 70% of the responses to the Fair Consideration Framework advertising happens within the first 2 weeks. the first 2 weeks. After that, it sort of then straddles along. At the peak of, at the trial of the COVID pandemic, that was in October 2020 when we tightened the advertising period to 28 days. We were having our job vacancies versus the job openings was about 0.5, meaning that there were fewer job vacancies for a lot of job seekers. Today, it has gone up almost 4 or 5-fold. It's 2.4 as of end of March. Now it's in excess of 2.4. And many companies have fed back that they are really finding it very difficult to hire. And if they wait for the period of time for them, for the 28 days, they will lose the particular person that they want to hire. And it compromises the operations of the business. The policies remain unchanged. All of our policies, including the Compass framework, we're on track with regards to the Workplace Fairness Legislation Act. We are going through the different consults. On top of that, we have also kept the minimum qualifying salary for the S-Pass and the E-Pass in tandem with economic development. I do not think that this is wrong time. Today, we are coming in from a position of strength. And if the businesses cannot ramp up when they have business, when they have orders coming in, and they cannot ramp up, and if the downturn happens and they get hit, I think it'll be even a worse off situation for these businesses. Now, having said that, I've also shared that we will not hesitate to take action if companies discriminate against locals or if they discriminate against anyone in terms of characteristics. So, in that sense, we continue to monitor the space very, very closely. So I think, to your point, rest assured, I think we're on top of it. Thank you.
Mr. Sharul Taha.
I'd like to thank Minister for sharing the story of the romance of the Three Kingdoms. As he mentioned, Liu Pei had to visit his friends 3 times to convince him to join the team. Minister also mentioned that there will be stringent and rigorous checks to ensure the validity of the application. Similarly, as mentioned by Mr. Chia, MNCs are also facing intense challenge to attract these talents to drive transformation from Singapore. How do we ensure the annual checks for these pass holders can be implemented in a way that is not too onerous so that we can continue to attract these talents so that we can position Singapore to lead business transformation from our island? Thank you.
I thank the member for his spot-on assessment. We are very nuanced. In my speech, I've also said about giving them time to ramp up and a runway to develop. And we want to encourage this group of talent to take risks so that, calculated risks, of course, to make sure that when the payoff is significant so that our entire economy, our entire ecosystem benefits. Having said that, we will, depending on because it's a wide diaspora of talent that we're looking at and different sectors, we will work very closely with the sector agencies to evaluate on a very regular basis. And I would also welcome members' contribution in giving us ideas as to how we can continue to make this scheme a very sustainable and self-improving one. Thank you.
Ms. Herting Rue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a quick clarification. I did not ask about quotas in my PQ, but instead about estimates or projections on how many are anticipated to be under the ONE pass. I note that MOM said over the weekend that they expect about 7,000 or 8,000 to be on this new pass based off the top 5% of the EP holders. Although, of course, this scheme is meant to attract more top talent who are not already here in Singapore. I have one clarification for the Minister. And it is about the promotional activities to be carried out to promote this ONE Pass to top talent outside of Singapore. And what is the budget, and how would the success of such promotional activities be determined when deciding whether or not we're actually getting to the right people we're hoping to attract into Singapore? Thank you.
I thank Ms. He for her point. I think just as I complimented her in my speech about the fact that she got the gist of it, she asked us about a promotional budget. There's no promotional budget. I think for us, our aspiration to build a world-class ecosystem, to build a world-class talent base where we become a giant magnet to attract the best talent from all over the world to come here and contribute. I think that in itself sends a very strong signal. I hope that clarifies my point. Thank you.
See you, Pon Wing.
I thank the Minister for his statement. I agree with the need to bring in top talent. However, some of my residents have feedback to me about concerns with regards to the ONE Pass and how our local talent can compete fairly for opportunities. As such, I would like to ask the Minister to elaborate on how we can give assurance to local workers, especially the broad middle segment, that they can benefit from this. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Yip for surfacing this. Today, as I've said, and they're not motherhood statements, the core of what we do, whether it is Compass, whether it is the ONE Pass, whether it is the raising of the minimum qualifying salaries, the local qualifying salary at the work pass levels, everything we do, everything PM, our DPM, SMs, all the ministers and everyone here in this room are focused on about is that singular objective of how we can continue to provide opportunities, good pay, good career progression for our Singapore local core. That is really at the core of what we do. So to that end, we should not focus on just this ONE Pass. The ONE Pass is about creating new cheese, new opportunities, new economic opportunities, new diaspora of different sectors for it to then spill over to our SMEs, our other local enterprises, so that we can continue to provide that opportunity for our local Singaporeans. Simultaneously, in fact, contemporaneously, we have a whole slew of schemes today that we constantly groom and provide that opportunity for our Singaporeans to make sure that they keep abreast, and in some instances, we try to even nudge them to go ahead, think out of the box, so that they can compete. We have under MAS, we have the iPost program, which is running very well. There is the TESA program, where we train our tech talent. I've earlier on also shared that we have this Global Ready Talent Program. In March this year, during the budget COS, I also announced the Singapore Global Executive Program. We have got the Skills Leadership Development Initiative. So these are 5 very big initiatives aimed at exposing Singaporeans to leadership positions, to thought processes, thought leaders all over the world where we imbibe. Because the depth, the size of our markets in Singapore alone cannot give our fellow Singaporeans that necessary runway, that necessary depth to acquire the deep expertise and experience that's required. So we constantly do that. And if there are more programs that members of this House do have, feel free to suggest it to us, and we are prepared to consider that as well. So I want to reassure all members of the House that this is the core of what we do. It is for our Singaporeans, our fellow Singaporeans, for our future. Because 50 years down, I think many of you would still be around. You want to continue to see Singapore to still be brimming with opportunities, optimism, and hope. I'm certain I won't be around, but I'm sure many of you will still be around. So I hope that gives you that reassurance. Thank you.
Mr. Leong, why?
I think no one in this House will be against attracting more foreign talents into our country. However, if you imagine, 20 years ago, I don't know who is the manpower minister then, he would have stood there and make the same message about attracting foreign talents. But over the last 15 to 20 years, can I ask the minister whether we have been attracting the right kind of talents, since now 95% of the EPs currently do not meet the one pass requirement? Second question. So we are very concerned, and that's why we are asking many questions. But the second point I want to make is that I support, and I take the same position as the LO and Workers' Party, that why we cannot include mentoring, skills transfer, and one more thing I have mentioned in many of my speeches, succession planning. When we bring the talent, the foreign talent, or the global talent into our market. It doesn't make sense. I asked the minister, does it make sense that on one hand, we pay to
Mr.
get
Leong,
talents in?
could you keep a question succinct?
Yeah, I'm coming to the question. Yeah? Does it make sense that on one hand, we pay the talents to come in to help us in capabilities transfer, but on the other hand, we have a lot of talents that are working in Singapore and they opt to work in Singapore, and we didn't make it a requirement to renew their visa. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Leong for his expose and also his two questions. I think that to his first point, 20 years ago, if I may just use one example, and that is the example that PM delivered in the National Day rally, when he talked about the entire biomedical industry. And he also mentioned Mr. Philip Yeo, who went out there, brought the whales into Singapore, and developed our biomedical enterprise. I think that Mr. Leong himself would have benefited from the PCR testing. At some stage, he may have used the fortitude test kits and so on. That came out of a homegrown enterprise, this company called Meraxis, and again, it was a spin-off from the entire biomedical industry that PM talked about during the National Day rally. So I don't think I need to dwell on that. And I can go on with multiple examples to showcase to him that indeed, from where we have started to what we are, we have certainly benefited from the global talent coming here with the transfers of skill sets, capabilities, knowledge, and so on and so forth. To his second point, in terms of succession planning and so on, I think we are now at the stage where we are not only looking at skill sets alone, expertise, more so than the proxy of the $30,000 mark. We are looking at creating a significantly different ecosystem. One that will hopefully ensure our continued prosperity and progress for the next 5 or 10 decades and beyond. I don't think we need to go into I'm very optimistic that in subsequent parliamentary sittings, there will be opportunity for the member to continue to raise these type of questions, but let's leave it as that. Thank you very much.
Mr. Desmond Chu.
Thank you, Minister. Now, many countries have made changes to their talent policies. UAE have their golden visa. UK and Germany have introduced new passes to attract talent. I'd like to ask, with this suite of changes, where does this place Singapore in terms of our competitiveness compared to the other countries? Is this sufficient for us to get our fair share of talent and help companies to grow?
I thank Mr. Chu for the question. We don't have a target country that we think we're going to compete with. The golden visa, I presume Mr. Chu is referring to, pertains to UAE and Dubai. Their aspirations and our aspirations are actually quite different because of the fact that they have different levels of constraints, just like we have our own constraints. We are starting from a position of strength. We looked at potential new enterprises that we see ourselves getting our first mover and our competitive advantage in, and we are going after those sectors where we are going to be able to create new cheese for ourselves. And with that new cheese, provide significant economic opportunities to benefit our entire ecosystem of small, medium enterprise and raising up our Singapore core. So to that end, that is what we're focused on today. To go beyond identifying different sectors and so on would also compromise our ability to ramp up and to upscale. And as I've shared with, in my interview with Bloomberg, I don't want to start a bidding war. So I hope that addresses Mr. Chu's points. Thank you.